So, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. So, let's begin, inshallah, once again with the conditions in a much more focused, clear way. The the first condition that he mentions is we talked about. He says that there's five shurut al-wujub. The translator says prerequisites of the salah. That somewhat works, but we talked about that before. But shurut al-wujub means those things that are in place that create the obligation to pray. You know, one of the things that comes up, and we mentioned it before, is that Qadi Iyad, he adds on to this. He says that there are five. Can everyone see that highlight or no?
No.
So we mentioned that Qadi Iyad added on to this the condition of bulugh al-da'wah. Okay, and so that would make this six conditions. But technically, technically the whole debate comes into, how could we look at these conditions? And so in the point of technicality, Al-Abbi, Al-Abbi is an important scholar. Al-Abbi, he was from the scholars of Al-Azhar al-Sharif. Um, his name is
It was,
Salih
excuse me?
Abdul Sami' Al-Abbi. Huh?
العبي
Yes.
بالعين او بالهمزه؟
No, there's no Ain. It's Hamza. Al-Abbi.
طيب.
Yeah. Unique name. Unique name. Sheikh Saleh Abdul Samia Al-Abbi Al-Azhari Al-Maliki. And he's an important scholar. I've mentioned him throughout the years. He's a later day scholar in the Maliki school, known by his books, but not really talked about. You see the difference? He's not one of those scholars that people talk about much. But Al Abbi, one of the reasons why he's important is because Al Abbi has explained most of the books that are popularly studied in the madhab, going all the way to Mukhtasar al Khalil. So Al Abbi is one of those hidden gems that's a master of the madhab, not only fiqh, but he also delved into other sciences as well. He has an explanation of Alfiyat ibn Malik in the Arabic language.
He's
But,
still with us.
huh?
He's still with us.
No, he passed away. He passed away. So, but Al Abbi, the reason why I bring him up is because of this problem that we were talking about. Sometimes sometimes in the Maliki fiqh, the conditions for the salah are not consistent. Sometimes five, sometimes six. So Al-Abbi, he brings this discussion up on this point, I'm going to mention it in a moment. Another scholar is Ahmed Mustafa Qasim al-Tahtawi. Al-Tahtawi with the ta. Tahtawi. I think he's
Yeah.
still alive.
Yes.
Okay. Uh, he's like Egypt has a lot of people like this. If he's alive, he must be up in age.
MashaAllah.
But Tahtawi, he also has done a lot of work in the madhab.
Maliki.
Maliki, yes, more focused on the Maliki school. He's done a lot of work on the madhab, and he has been instrumental in like the idea of tahqiq, which is basically producing a critical edition or verifying a position, in terms of these books of fiqh. So the relevancy of bringing that up is that people like Al-Abbi and Tahtawi, especially Al-Abbi, uh, although Tahtawi does it as well, they're very familiar with the madhab and the inconsistencies that are in the books, right? And so he says when it comes to these conditions, Al-Abbi, he says that there's some another, right? He says وفي عد هذا من شروط صحة الصلاة أو صحة من شروط الصحة نظر, right? And this is I'm taking it from another book in which when he's talking about the whole concept of tark al-kalam, which we started off with as an example. He says that to consider this to be part of the conditions for the soundness of the salah, yeah, it is a matter of speculation, and that is rooted in the fact that actually uh, this is one of the obstacles for salah versus putting it in the category of that which is in the sound, that which is needs to be in place in order for the salah to be sound.
صح.
The concept here. I'm what all I'm the only reason I'm quoting that is to say that okay, don't get caught up. And I keep mentioning this. This one says five. This one says six.
Yeah.
You know, don't get caught up in that. So because it's important from the angle of what? It's important from the angle of understanding that these issues are ijtihadi. Okay, the ijtihadi meaning that they're research based. One research may lead to one conclusion, another research leads to another conclusion. Now that happens in the Maliki school. It's not there's no it doesn't mean that things are thrown off. It doesn't mean that uh, you throw out the book. It doesn't mean that the madhab sucks. It doesn't mean that this is confusion. Sometimes it happens that people have those ideas, right? So the first thing is that Salah itself, I mean, the for the Muslim Salah itself is known by necessity. Muslim and non-Muslim alike both know you don't need any research. You need to be a scholar. The non-Muslim will tell you, well, the Muslims pray. I know I may not always be clear how many times a day they pray, but I know they pray a lot. If they're a little more knowledgeable, that person will tell you Muslims pray 5 times a day and they face Mecca. I don't know the exact prayer times, but I do know that they pray 5 times a day. So the idea of the salah being an obligation is something that is understood by necessity. Ma'lum min ad-din bi-darura, right? Even the non-Muslim knows that, right? So when we look at the prerequisites of the salah, first thing is just that reality that this establishment of the salah as a rukn is already known, that it's an obligation, right? When we talk about Islam, this is where Qadi Iyad, and I mentioned this before, he adds on to this bulugh al-da'wah, and I agree with them 100%. Part of it comes from the context that we live in, right? And part of it is that it just makes sense. Most of the fiqh is written from the angle of the person that is not dealing with most of this fiqh, and this is what separates it from the fiqh of the Sahaba, and we need to be really clear on this. The Sahaba were coming into Islam. These books are written at times, depending on when it's written, but you start talking about hundreds of years of people in Islam already. The Sahaba, when they're communicating and teaching Deen, they're dealing with people coming into Deen still. Like, look at the case of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and I'm not going to take it further than that. Study the life of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and you see that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq dealt with people that didn't want to pay the salah. I mean, they didn't want to pay the zakat, right? And so the whole issue of what is a pillar of Islam in the early phase of Dawah came into question. And that discussion is taken up in the explanation of the 40 hadith by Hafiz ibn Rajab, Jami al-Ulum wal-Hikam, on what the denial of what constitutes kufr. Is it the denial of all the 5 pillars or denial of one pillar, which would be the salah, and so on and so forth? And then discussions come up on how do you deal with the person that doesn't pray, right? The person that rejects salah, is it equivalent to the person that struggles with salah? So those types of questions, they come up more so in a society in which the deen is not completely established. But when the deen is established, and is the establishment of the salah is clearly known to everybody, then this type of thing here, discussion with regard to the ruling of the person who denies a rukn or core element of the salah, then you start having a different type of discussion. This is an open debate issue in recent times. What do you do with the person, the murtad, the person that decides not to be Muslim any longer? And some have said, look, that person can choose to be Muslim. Just don't disturb the balance in society. Choose not to be Muslim. Don't disturb the balance in society. That's one approach towards that. In any event, the first condition is Islam. So we have to ask, how is it that Islam is coming to the people? And that's where Qadi Iyad brings up that there has to be, the da'wah has to have reached that person. In the hadith in which Mu'adh is being sent to Yemen, uh, one of the first things that Muad calls the people to is Tawheed, and if the people accept Tawheed, then to establish the Salah, to establish the Salah. So, but the people have to be, they have to be groomed into that. Second issue is that in the time of the Sahaba, none of those people that were teaching uh, were there without a mission. In other words, the people, they were sent to teach and they were responsible for teaching. That's why there was less confusion because the people were sent and designated to be teachers, especially in the time of Umar. The free for all concept that we have in places like the West and the US, that didn't exist. You had people that were designated for fatwa, people designated to teach. Anybody that does a cursory basic level study on the lives of the Sahaba will know that. That's something that's important. Any thoughts on that before we move on?
As I'm concerned, it's understood.
Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Um, yeah, that discussion came up the other day. A friend of mine who took their shahada a couple months ago, um, they're just they're just struggling with the idea of like obligatory obligations, like the pillars and having to pray at appointed times. And why is it necessary for it to have to be in Arabic? And um it's like I mean they took their shahada on their own. They studied and they felt that it was the right thing for them to become Muslim, but now they're really struggling with like just the discipline, so like how do you even approach it, or do you just leave it alone?
I mean, that's why this issue is gradual. It's a gradual process, and part of the dilemma that we have in terms of dealing with new Muslims is we want to deal with new Muslims like we're in a traditional society. And so it's better to deal with them from the prophetic lens, step by step, than to deal with them based on the legacy that was developed, with prophetic knowledge, which is the tradition. Uh, when you start involving them in a lot of details because of the American mindset, they become rebellious. So, really a person, at the beginning, they don't, the whole issue of learning even the Fatiha and all of these types of things. Uh, there's ways to kind of get around that, and that needs its own discussion. The reality of the situation is that, at the beginning you're learning, and it could be overwhelming. So they could be brought in, gradually into the whole process, as to not to overwhelm them. And that needs its own discussion about how do you deal with the whole issue of the learning al-Fatiha. Do you use, the the Shafi position on that, and or do you do or do you use like the Hanafi position that was kind of defunct, which was basically praying your own language? That even though that's no longer the position of Imam Abu Hanifa, some scholars have advocated for that, although other scholars are against it. You know, so there's various ways of dealing with that to get to the goal. The goal is to establish the person in the deen. So
Yes.
why are we going to fight over the approach if those things were there in the fiqh? We can use it. It's not like we're making something up. It may not be the ideal stance or ideal set of conditions, but to throw somebody into the whole Arabic thing, you know, it can become confusing. Does that make sense or not?
Yeah, definitely. Barakallah feek. I think for me, it's like I don't even mm, like. I mean, Alhamdulillah, they read the Quran. I just don't know if I even know where it says in the Quran, pray 5 times a day, where it says recite in Arabic. Like those are the things that I wouldn't be able to tell you where it says it specifically. I know it says to pray at certain times.
Well, that's the problem, but that's the problem that comes in with the whole issue of demanding delil,
Mm-hmm.
that it becomes a little confusing, after a point, because not everybody's at that level to know the delil. But in the Shafi school, the takbir, saying Allahu Akbar, is enough for that person who doesn't know Arabic to pray the salah.
Jeff, you mentioned that Abu Hanifa's stance was to pray in their own language. That was from him, or that was from his students?
No, that was from him at one particular time,
Okay.
and then he revoked the
Sure.
position, the praying
Okay.
Persian. Yeah, the praying Persian. It was that was his position at one point.
Okay. Barakallahu feek.
Yeah, yeah. So you have three courses of action. That have the person learn the Fatiha in Arabic, or say Allahu Akbar, or say it in English. People won't like that. You know what I'm saying? But that's there in the fiqh. And if you can actualize it, uh, because there's a reason to, if it's going to keep that person a Muslim without overwhelming them, then all the more so. With the understanding that, that person later on will graduate to a higher level. That's important. 5 times a day, the prayer 5 times a day, you can find it easy in the 40 hadith. Buni Islam ala khamsa. This
Yeah.
is Islam is established on five, and one of the pillars is the salah, and it's mentions the salah. So that uh, the Quran gives general guidelines, and in any event in the beginning of the da'wah, uh, 5 salawats were not established. They began with 3, and the way that we cut the salah in traveling is how the salah was for the most part. 2 rakat, 2 rakat, and then for the most part, then it was established, with the exception of Maghrib. Then it was established the way that it is. So when we travel, we're really praying the salah as it initially was, and there's ease in it. Does that make sense?
هذا قبل وجوبها فروضها.
No, the salah was established, but then even in the beginning, it was not fully established the way that we have it now.
ما فهمت. I don't understand. What do you mean it was established the way we have it now? Wasn't when the Rasulullah sallallahu, just for point of clarification, if I may, wasn't when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam traveled up in the Miraj, wasn't it already established that we had to pray 5 times?
The salah, the command to the salah was there in a general way, not in a detailed way.
Uh-huh.
The prayer of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the getting of the prayer is one thing, and the establishment of the prayer is another thing, right? And
Yes.
so you find as a common point that the scholars indicate that in the early prayer, it was not like, for instance, Dhuhr was not 4 rakat.
Really?
Yes, it was 2 rakat.
So when Jibril came, this was prior Jibril or alayhi
Yeah,
salam,
when
or
Jibril comes, Jibril gives them a further indication.
okay,
Of
mashallah.
Jibril comes and gives a further indication of what are the details. I'm trying to find the.
Yeah. I got you. I was shy to ask.
No, there's a specific
Mashallah.
date. There's a specific date. Um, one second. But I have to trigger my memory.
Nah, yeah, I don't want you to detain the class. That'll be a side issue. Inshallah, whatever, whatever suits your convenience for that. But that's good information. I didn't, mashallah.
Well, that's the problem, that there's a lot of the fiqh is not that you have to get that from the history of fiqh.
Yes.
And a lot of times people don't know these things about Islamic legislation, how it works.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know, even sometimes when it comes to the hadith, they don't know that it's a little hard, more difficult to do than the Quran, but some hadith come before other hadith,
Yes.
right? And so when it comes to understanding the order of revelation, that's why we have, and especially in hadith, we have abrogation, because some things were done earlier on that are not done later on,
Right.
right? And so in Islamic legislation, it comes gradually. Nothing comes all at one time. One of the characteristics of the Sharia is of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is this point where it differs from the Sharia of the other prophets, is that it came gradually. Alayhi salam.
Yes.
The Quran was revealed gradually, unlike the Torah with the Injil and all that type of stuff.
Yes.
Those, the Zabur and so on and so forth, and whatever else was revealed. I shouldn't say stuff, but other revelations, because I'm looking up at the same time that I'm talking. I'm trying to pull up this section of a book, and so the characteristics of the revelation that was given to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam of the of the sifat, or of the characteristics, or the khasa'il, is this issue of graduality. So the rulings came gradually. That is indicated too as well in the hadith of Mu'adh, when Mu'adh is sent to Yemen, and the Prophet ﷺ gives him directives on how to teach the people, to teach them gradually. And it's known to the students of the Sharia that that's the reality, but it's not talked about. It's brought up. It's not talked about in public sometimes, but it's is also in the books uh, of the history of Islamic legislation. You're going to see that, you can find it even in English, because right
Mhm.
now you have a few books that have been published in English as well, and it'll talk about that. So initially, and that's one of my subjects that I like to deal with. I like to understand the backdrop of all of this stuff,
Right.
because that's why studying the occasions of revelation, which is this is part of that science. Uh, we don't just say asbab al-nuzul, and like ahwal al-nuzul as well. The history of it. And studying the lives of the companions also gives you that knowledge. Because you can see what was taking place at what time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when were they engaging in certain actions? When were they not engaging in certain actions? Take as an example the whole idea of military defense. Well, there was no armed struggle for years, to show you that Islam is not rooted in also in the whole idea of forcing people to become Muslim. The at one point in time that didn't exist, then it was legislated. The same thing with the drinking of alcohol. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum went all the way into Medina, and they were drinking alcohol,
Mm.
right? And so then part of the reason we know that is because some of them came to Salah intoxicated.
Mm-hmm.
So
And that was like
they
the
came to
initial.
Salah intoxicated. And so at that point in time, you see that the Salah is established, and the ruling that would prohibit alcohol was not established yet. And then at a certain point, the Salah is clearly established, and then uh, the whole issue of drinking is prohibited. The same thing with speaking. In the beginning of the Salah, the companions
Yes.
were allowed to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Then then the ruling came to remove speaking from them. Uh, Before in books, they used to explain the characteristics of Islam to the non-Muslims. One of the things that was always brought up with pride was that the prohibition of alcohol in the U.S. It was called the time of prohibition. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't work on eliminating the drinking of alcohol from the society, because it was not gradual. It was imposed at one time. So it didn't give the people the chance to acclimate themselves to that change. And so here, this is where Islam is called Deen al-Fitra, the deen that it abides by your nature. So So that part of it is not the understanding of how legislation works is not always open to us. And not every scholar talks about that in that way. Because what we get it as, is just a given. That's
Mhm.
why Qadi Iyad, when he adds on the condition of Bulugh Dawah, that the Dawah should have reached the people. How are you going to obligate people to Salah, even though it's something that is known uh, by necessity, meaning you don't have to do research now to know that Salah is a part of Islam? Well, the reality is that in the beginning, that's not the case. And maybe in a non-Muslim environment is not the case as well, even though the non-Muslims know something about Islam. So the Baluga Dawah part comes into when we start talking about Islam as a condition, it comes back to the point that there has to be knowledge that's perpetuated and taught. You know what I'm saying? So here, Qadi Bassam, who was a contemporary of Sheikh Uthaymeen, in his explanation, Bulugh al-Maram, he says, فرضت ليلة المراج قبل الهجرة بنحو 3 سنين. Right.
ثلاثة
So Salat was legislated where?
in Mecca.
Right. According to that, it says that the Salat was made fard, or the obligation, Laylat al-Maraj in Mecca before 3 years before Hijrah, not in Medina.
Yes.
That was the purpose of saying that when I was pointing to that it was established, but the details were not established the way that we know them until later, right? So he says, Furidat rakatain, that 2 rak'ah were established. And this is what what has remained of it in, uh, is seen in, what has remained of that early legislation, put it that way, is seen in the Salah of the traveler. Because in the Salah of the traveler, there is no 4 rak'at of Dhuhr, there is no four rak'at of Asr, there is no 4 rak'at of Isha, right? Those 3 salawat are brought down to 2 rak'at each.
Is it safe to say that that's the asl?
Yeah, that's the Asl. That's what they say.
Yeah. MashaAllah.
That's what they say.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the only rulings that we have, or one of the only acts of ibadah that we have, that we didn't get it directly from Jibreel.
Right. Alayhi salam.
The Prophet ﷺ got it directly from Allah wa ta'ala.
Mm. Interesting.
So when we talk about the first condition of Islam, that remember that Qadi Iyad adds on Bulugh al-Da'wah, that
Yes.
the people have to be taught. It's not just a given. The people have to be taught. And so even when it comes to Bulugh al-Da'wah, it means technically also that the person becomes Muslim. But when it comes to the prayer, to properly understand the obligations, people have to be taught that, man. Right? It doesn't
Yes.
make sense to go through these conditions and we're not talking about the reality behind them. Does not make sense at all. Or else we could have done this like in 10 minutes and we're done. You know what I'm saying? Um, but it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. So sometimes, and some of this is, even I say this because I've mentioned this in different occasions. Sometimes it's better to stick to one book that's complete. But to be honest with you, the little books in the madhab, although at times they may seem to contradict each other, but books like the Ashmawiya and the Akhdari, they remain classics, so to speak, because of the type of knowledge they communicate. And it's very clear that when you read these books, you're not going to find that knowledge in the bigger books in the same way, or in the intermediate books, or in the more complete primer texts. And that's why those scholars, uh, they've been blessed that those books have remained, because of they've taught in such a way, they taught certain aspects of the Salah that it's unprecedented. You don't find it uh, that other scholars are writing in the same exact way. And what they did is they clarified really well the issue of the shurut of the Salah, the conditions of the Salah, whether they are conditions of obligation, whether they're conditions of soundness of the Salah, whether conditions of obligation, meaning whether they're conditions that obligate a person to pray. These conditions, once they're in place, then a person is obligated to pray. Or whether they're conditions of Salah. These conditions, when they're met in the Salah, is sound. But also, there's the idea that there's conditions that overlap.
Yes.
There's conditions that overlap. And so they're both conditions of obligation and soundness of the Salah.
Yeah. Yes.
Sometimes these conditions that we see here also are called shurut al-ada, that these things have to be in place in order for the salat to be performed. But you don't find that language is weird. You don't find that language widespread. The idea of shurut al-ada is not always widespread. It's not
Performance and soundness.
it's not like shurut al-ada is like the conditions for performance.
Yes.
They're not, that concept is not always, you don't find that is always talked about.
Right.
That you don't find is always referred to. Right.
But at an academic level, it's not talked about, but is it understood?
It's like language within the madhab that it's like, it's not, when you go to a lot of when you look around and you see a lot of the books, you're not going to find it always talked about. Shurut adah saw.
Mm.
And of those are to face the Qibla, to be of a pure state, for you to cover your aura, right?
Yes.
For your body to be clean,
Mhm.
let me be a little more specific. So shurut al-ada are facing the Qibla, for the place to be clean, for the clothes to be clean, and you're covering your aura. You're in a state of purity. You're in a state of purity.
Yes. Are you still here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are considered to be the four conditions of that. So, or performance. Well,
I only caught two.
here in the state of in the conditions of soundness, that comes up as well. facing the Qibla, covering the parts, right? Purity, the purity of the clothes, purity of state, purity of the body. So that overlaps, except that in some books you find that they call them those four that were mentioned. Write those down, facing the Qibla, purity from impurity, whether on the clothes, the body, or the place of prayer, covering the designated areas of the body, the aura, and being in a pure state. Those are considered to be conditions of soundness and conditions of performance.
Yes.
Is there any book that is a good reference for like women and the whole bleeding and postpartum and what, when you can start praying again and what you got to do to get ready for prayer?
I mean, in in the Maliki school, that comes up because there's not a lot of distinguishing between the male and the female.
Mm-hmm.
So in the sense of the fiqh of Tahara, that comes up. The
Okay.
Hanafi school has more details in that, and there's even some books written in English, uh, specifically on that issue.
Yeah, I need like a guideline for the postpartum stuff. So, or just like the whole what the procedure is for,
What do you mean
when
the
you're supposed to
postpartum?
start Salah, when
What do you mean the postpartum?
well, like just because the female body, it changes. Like sometimes you have blood, one day you have blood, one day you don't have blood. Like menstruation cycles can really
Yeah,
they
but that comes back down to custom in the what are the minimal amount? What is the minimal amount of time that's allowed in the madhab?
right was the minimal. And like I just remember reading as like a 20-year-old, like, oh, you can't pray, if there's like people used to go to Aisha with different cottons and be like, what color is this? What color is that? Does this mean I can start? Does this mean I have to wait? So, and like I said, as our bodies are constantly changing, so it gets really confusing. Like, all right, am I obligated to pray or should I wait? Should I start? You know.
Sheikh Yusuf, did you do Tahara before this?
Yeah, and then sometimes you do it and then a day will go by and then you realize,
No,
oh,
no, no. I meant Sheikh Yusuf, did he teach Tahara before teaching Salah?
that's a good question. I mean, I think we've covered it in
Oh,
general
no, we
principle,
did
right?
in this book. It doesn't start like that. Tahara comes after.
Oh, okay. Well, mashallah.
Yeah, Tahara comes after, and so but she studied in Tayseed Seminary though.
Yeah, okay.
I don't, that confusion should be clarified with the whole issue of the uh the days. The color of the blood also comes into it, but um there's just a distinguishing between the reddish and the brownish blood, and the number of days determines whether it's menstrual blood or not. I mean,
Um,
we can come back to that, inshallah. So
yeah, inshallah, I'm gonna go to what's that place called? The Rabata Culture Center. But I didn't see any books over there. I'm gonna see if I can find somebody.
there's I'll send you some stuff. I'll send you some stuff.
Okay, I appreciate it.
But so so we covered the issue of maturity as well. Uh, we talked about the issue of salah. We talked about the issue of the salah being known by necessity. Talked about the issue of Islam. And in terms of maturity, the in the madhab by default, 18 years old is age at which when 18 years old hits, then it's automatically assumed that what that you're puberty.
Mm-hmm.
Once 18 years of age hits. I was looking for some
That's
specific.
the Maliki madhab.
Yeah, there's some differences over the age, but among the schools, but 18 is the max.
Yes.
It's like once 18 hits, then you're just assumed to be what? Puberty.
Mukallaf. And the minimum is 15.
No, the minimum we would not set at 15.
Is it understood?
I mean, some people hit puberty at like some girls get their period at like 9.
Yeah, that's why there's no minimum age. There's only
Okay.
maximum age. In the Maliki in the it's either 15 or 18. Shafi school 15. Maliki school, they put like 18 for the markers of puberty. And so there's, like we mentioned, there's the whole issue. So if once it's shared between the male and the female is the wet dream. And of course, the woman is distinguished by blood. Hairs on the private parts is another sign of maturity, the changing of the voice. Those are markers. It's upon Allah. I'm looking for something specific. Anyway, I can't find it. Last night I had it. there was specific language that I was looking for. Um, so we mentioned the wet dream is shared between male and female. The blood is what designates the woman or the young woman from the young man. The pubic hairs, the obvious change of voice because of the Adam's apple, so to speak, coming in. And if none of those markers are visible, right, then if none of those markers are visible, then we come back to what? Anybody?
I didn't say that again, please.
If none of those markers are visible, then what do we come back to?
Come back to the person is not eligible to pray.
Mm-hmm. The
No,
conditions of prayer.
no. We come back to 18 years old as being the default.
It's done. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
The limit?
Wait, he's 18 years old. Okay.
Huh?
Are you
Yeah,
referring to the limit?
Yeah, I mean, if the markers are not there or the indicators, then we come back to the age.
when he reached 15, okay, when he reached 15 or 18, according, okay, to know what you're teaching now, 18. إنما, I don't know.
Huh?
I don't know because I'm saying like when we do a Sulu fiqh, they're saying the mukallif, he becomes a candidate, like you're saying those markers were mentioned, but if none of them signposts are uh, are visible,
Mm-hmm.
then a person waits until either one reaches 15. I was taught 15, but
But
you're
that's why,
saying 18 now.
but
I
yeah,
would,
but I said that in the Shafi school is 15. And I
oh
said there's differences of opinion on the issue.
yeah, I'm not saying no,
But
Sheikh
but
Yusuf.
the default position is just no to remove the confusion. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Because
Mhm.
you said, "Oh, I don't know." Is so to remove that, one opinion is the whole issue of the 18. That in the madhab.
Yeah. Hmm. So that's what I'm saying. You're saying we go back to 18. So I'm just adding that to my armamentarian either because I used to say 15, so I would say from 15 to 18. If
Yeah,
I'm telling you, do you understand now?
yeah.
Excuse me?
Said yeah.
Okay. Hmm.
The important thing sometimes is, not to. What you find is the more you study fiqh, you realize it's
Yes,
not that rigid. The rigidity comes when people can't move outside of the framework that they studied, or they don't know how to fill in the gaps in the framework.
exactly.
It's just what they know, and that's it.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And that's where the problem comes in at. But there was language that I was looking for
Uh-huh.
that I wanted to share, but it's fine. You know what I'm saying? We can continue moving forward. With the issue of intellect, which is better than reason as a concept, intellect, al-aql, uh,
Yeah.
is one of what we call manat al-taqlif.
Uh-huh.
It's manat al-taqlif is like its core on the issue of taklif. It has to be present. So the person who is in a coma, the person who's in a coma, the person who, um, I found the language. The person who's in the coma, the person who is sleeping,
Right, right.
person
The pen
who,
is raised.
or a person who loses consciousness, then there's no obligation on that person. There's differ, there's differing among the scholars with regard to who? With regard to the person that's intoxicated. If you remove responsibility from the person that is intoxicated, then the person will get away with uh, possible murder.
So,
And that's why you find in the system the idea of manslaughter and you know even in this system, there's levels that a person is assigned when it comes to taking away the life of another person, whether it's intentional or unintentional. You know, there's degrees to that. But the example here is only given to say that intoxication does not totally remove you from responsibility. See?
mm,
Now, in the case of salah, a person shouldn't pray while they're intoxicated or overly sleepy, even. You know,
yes.
but still, what obligates the salah is intellect. But intoxication does not remove the obligation, right?
Um, I have here the two madhabs, the two camps, and they differ in opinion. One of them, the majority of the ulama say that if he doesn't understand al-khitab, then he's not responsible. It was things of that nature.
Yeah, but
Just put in there.
that comes back to the issue of bulugh dawah.
Hmm. Okay, I got you.
And some of that come from a discriminatory, prejudiced approach to the deen. Because even they come back to the idea of if he doesn't understand the Arabic language, is he responsible, not responsible? That makes for a good.
No, Habibi. No, no, you got me wrong. Not that. We're talking about drunkenness.
No, but
Uh-huh.
I'm talking about uh, a position that is in some discussions in usul al-fiqh
Uh-huh.
when it comes
Yeah.
to the issue of understanding the khitab.
Mm-hmm.
The in so and so some of them have said even to that point where when we start coming back to Islam and understanding Islam, you know,
Mm.
you look at Abdul Karim Zaidan and El Wajiz, he
Uh-huh.
discusses that point, and it's not a new idea. If the person doesn't understand Arabic, can we hold them accountable or not? So that's why
Okay.
the whole issue that Qadi Iyad, Al Muhaddith, uh, Qadi Iyad was not only a scholar in fiqh, he was a Qadi and he was a Muhaddith. That's why I value his opinion highly, especially even though his book is not popular, but his book Qawaid, which is a basic book in Qawaid al-Islam, is a basic book in fiqh. It's not a book in more detailed issues in fiqh. But he adds on this issue of bulugh al-da'wah as one of the conditions. You know,
Okay.
how can people
Mm-hmm.
how can they have a clear understanding You know, if there's no if the dean is not taught. And then so then for us the whole issue comes in of understanding, you know, you understanding in your own language. But as far as the person that's intoxicated, they're obligated. Understanding the khitab doesn't come in at that point because the person that's intoxicated chose by sin to intoxicate themselves. Right. So
Can
the
I can I can I say something?
yeah.
Okay, what I'm saying is that some scholars were talking about them being intoxicated, even though they understand the language, but because of their intoxication, they don't understand what's being said at the haliyan at the time they're being spoken to. So that eliminates their. I'm not saying this. I say that eliminates them for being responsible for understanding. They say aqimus salat, let's pray. Because of their drunkenness,
No,
they
that's
don't
what I'm
understand.
saying to you. They're responsible for the
Excuse me.
that they're responsible for the establishment of the salah. What happens is that it's they shouldn't pray in that time because they don't know what they're saying.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm
No, but
saying.
there's a difference between the language of responsibility. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I thought we were speaking about the conditions for salat to be sound. You
No,
get me now?
no, we're talking here.
Yeah.
Conditions of salat. We're talking conditions of obligation still.
Okay.
We're here. That's the reason.
Okay.
The when you start talking about the conditions of the soundness, you don't have intellect that is mentioned here. There are seven
Mm,
versus purification, minor, major, second, purification from which these two can be considered one actually, just purification overall, which will bring them
mm.
out to six. But just purification in general, the
Okay.
covering the aura, facing the direction of the qibla, and knowing
Uh-huh.
uh, and that the time has come in, and knowing that time come in for the salah itself, that the time has entered,
Yeah.
and the sixth is avoiding speech, and the seventh is uh avoiding
Okay.
excessive movement. Now,
It's right. Okay. I thought there was akal was mentioned in there.
akal is mentioned as part of the conditions of obligation. It could be, it could be that we make the case and say that akal could be from the conditions of soundness and the conditions of obligation.
Or it overlaps.
Yes, we could say that it's, you know, we could say that it's from the two, but that's not how it's mentioned here. But it
Okay.
doesn't it doesn't matter because of course you have to be a if you're not present of mind and you're praying to the extent where your salah no longer has the form of the salah, either in speech or action. Is it a salah then at that point? No. So there's no issue there. But what I'm saying to you is that what I'm trying to separate or tease out is not using the word responsibility. They are
Yes.
responsible. Now the question is whether it's sound or not. That's an issue. It's a different issue.
Yes.
But they're responsible. And part of you see this come up because it's like people try to will say, well, I got high. Well, you caught a sin as well.
Yeah. Yes.
You caught a sin, a double sin. It is what it is. You abandoned the saw.
Mm-hmm.
No, there's no confusion there in that regard. So that's why I was mentioning responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then, on top of that, in the Maliki school, and we overlap with the Hanbali school on this, is that the kafir in the Maliki school and the Hanbali school is mukhatib before Sharia.
Mm-hmm.
So that what that means is that in the Maliki school and the Hanbali school, they don't distinguish between the Muslim and the non-Muslim when it comes to the issue of being obligated to establish the deen
Mm,
and the usul of the madhab.
yes.
And the dalil for that they use is lam nakum min al musallin, that the kafir will say on the day of Yom al Qiyamah, he will mention this ayah that that I was not from among those that prayed or established the salah. So the scholars come in and they say, well, why would the kafir say that if the kafir's actions were not uh, accepted anyway because the person didn't take shahada because of the da'wah.
It's interesting.
You know, so it creates an interesting discussion from the angle also of the Muslim trying to get off and selling the non-Muslim things that are haram under the pretense that they're not Muslim. So the idea becomes no, the non-Muslim is not allowed to drink the alcohol, and you're not allowed to sell the alcohol to the non-Muslim anyway,
Right.
Mm. I
because
was just thinking that I went to the store I ordered something online and it had pork in it, so I gave it to my neighbor.
right, and then in one position that doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
In another position, in the Maliki usul it does.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's forbidden. But in another position it's not. Those are discussions that take place in the in our discussions on Sharia.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yes.
it's just, I mean, it's a whole nother layer in going into those details. But the point that we're mentioning here is we're trying to come back, circle back, that when we talk about al-aql, right? Al-aql has a high place in the deen. There is no taklif without aql, right? There is no taklif without aql, without intellect. And so clouding the intellect, and this is where, we have to keep reminding ourselves, because sometimes, we also, from the maqasid of the Sharia, and the one that brought this up was Jamal ad-Din al-Atiyah, contemporary scholar, and that brainwashing or opening up the mind to misinformation or to the haram, we're harming ourselves. That's the idea or the category of zalimun uh, li nafsihi, the person that oppresses himself or herself. Right? There's three categories of people according to the Quran. Three categories of Muslim. Right? Zalimun li nafsi, a muqtasid, sabiqun bil khairat. Right? And so the idea is, the first one is the person that oppresses themselves through their sins and misgivings, misdoings, and all that. They weigh more than their good deeds. Then the muqtasid is the person that struggles it out with the self, and they're leaning more to good deeds than they are to bad deeds, and they replace their bad deeds with good deeds. And then the third person is sabiqun bil khairat. That person is like on a whole nother level in terms of racing and pursuing the good for himself and others, herself and others. And so in the case, of intellect, when we start talking about keeping the intellect free, part of being responsible is making sure that we don't oppress ourselves. And part of the oppression problem is the whole issue of miseducation, is the whole issue of indoctrination, the whole issue of brainwashing, the whole issue of exposing the mind to madness, not just in the form of alcohol or the latest drug on the scene, but also in what we feed ourselves. And we do that. You know what I'm saying? We do that for whatever reasons. We have different reasons why we do that. But intellect has a core function in the deen, in that regard. And so one of the objectives of the Sharia is hifd al-aql.
Yes.
And usually the maqasid or the objectives have two sides to them. One is preservatory, and the other one is cultivating. So developing the intellect is also part of preserving it, and um the Sharia encourages both. It encourages preserving and developing, not just preserving.
Sheikh Yusuf, how do you define taklif? I know in Urdu it means pain or hardship, but I don't know what it is in Arabic.
Yeah, that's similar to the Arabic, but in the that's linguistic. In the
Te- technical meaning.
Yeah,
yeah, in the technical or terminological or scientific or scholarly meaning, all of those things apply. The word takes on a new meaning.
because
Right?
when you said there is no taklif without akl, what is that? What does that mean?
That there's no obligation for a person to practice. A person is not responsible, meaning a person is not going, the issue of reward and punishment, responsibility is no longer there until that person's intellect returns.
Okay.
One of the dilemmas that we have in this issue of aql, to be honest with you, is that we have to look at intellectual burnout as a consequence of mental health and drugs and all this. This thing is not clear right now, 100%. We
Yeah.
have it's clear by definition, but it's not clear in reality, right? And so there's in forensic psychology, there's a study done Islamically which brings this issue
Is
up.
it
This comes up in the
Islamic?
this comes up in the section of Ahli and Usul al-Fiqh.
MashaAllah.
Who's responsible? Who's not responsible? What were you going to say?
I said Islamically. Forensically, you said forensically, then you added the word Islamically.
You said forensic psychology. Or no.
Psychology.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
a study, there's a forensic psychological study, but it's in the framework of Islam.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I didn't know that.
That comes up. Triple IT put it out. Triple IT put it out, and the whole issue of when is a person culpable, responsible, or not responsible comes up. But what I'm mentioning to you now is like mental health is thrown off. Also people are burnt out from drug use. So,
Yes.
so the physical apparatus of the brain, right? If we're going to say that intellect in part needs a physical apparatus, is damaged. So then
Yeah.
the question when it comes up, that's why the question comes up about culpability. Up to what point do we hold a person accountable?
Mm-hmm.
For instance, like is mentioned, like clinical depression.
Mm-hmm.
Can we bring clinical depression into this? And if a person is going through that type of state and they miss the salah, are they at the same level as the person that's not clinically depressed? that type of discussion, you're not finding it much
No,
because you
it
didn't
goes
have
back
those,
to you
didn't
being
have
with
those issues.
hmm
Those issues were not there. The environmental conditions, the food conditions, the experiences are not the same. You know what I'm saying? Uh, Even the fact that when we bring this up about the akal and the okay, up to, are we gonna the person that has an addiction? Are we holding that person accountable or not?
hmm
And that's what we mentioned, like intoxication.
Assalamualaikum. I'm ready.
Okay, ma.
Bibi,
Shiki, so I gotta go. Assalamu alaikum
Doctor.
warahmatullahi
Yeah,
wabarakatuh.
walaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Oh, okay, I understand exactly what you're saying. But then doesn't that bring into the, doesn't, okay, when a person, okay. But yeah, I was just thinking out loud. When a person is in a when a person loses his camel, he's in a state of bliss. When he finds
Well,
it, and then he says,
that's an important point. I mean, that goes even. This has been discussed. So, and this sometimes in the Salafi debates on tasawwuf, that part, the ulama have discussed that in the sense that those people that go out of their intellect due to some sort of mystic state or whatever, and they utter a word of kufr,
yeah,
or they make a mistake, like in the hadith of the person that is in a state of jubilation for finding the camel and
right,
confuses the wordings. Do we give them an excuse? So they're excused.
right,
But a person that's persisting on that is a whole different ballgame. You know what I'm saying? A
got
person
you.
is
Yes,
making a
got
doctrine out of it and so on and so forth. But it could be the case that a person is in a mystical state. And so you give them the benefit of the doubt. They may have said something that is not appropriate. You just don't immediately accuse them of kufr and so on and so
yeah,
forth.
yeah,
That's why there has to be some, deliberation, consideration, and that's there. The other fourth condition is the ending of the menstrual cycle,
yes,
and and basically the ending of the menstrual cycle and the postnatal or postpartum bleeding. We mentioned that, and then knowing the time, and we talked about these. We talked about the whole issue of becoming accustomed as well to the natural environment. And in that, there's no taqlid. The issue of the qibla, especially, a person has to, you know, be aware, be conscious in the case of the qibla. Uh, Even though that's not mentioned here, it's mentioned down from the conditions of the soundness of the salah. But I mentioned it here as well because we, when it comes to the issue of the time, and when it comes to the issue of the qibla, we're very lackadaisical in terms
yes,
of being in a position where we can determine ourselves. In the fiqh, it mentions especially uh, in the issue of the qibla down here that there's no taqleed in that a person has to make ijtihad as part of the sunnahs of the conditions. So you have to become accustomed to being aware of what are the directions that you're in. That's good. It makes us more conscious, and we talked about that. We were joking around with the whole 5% example,
hmm,
on where you be, but that was part of the just trying to give an example of saying, like, know where you're at on the geography.
yes,
Americans
yes,
usually are really bad on this because geography is not taught. whereas in other countries it is.
Right.
See, so a lot of times we're not conscious of these things. We're not conscious of exact north, south, east, west, where we're at. How the geography works and to map it out.
Yes.
So with that, we'll go over also the conditions of the soundness of Salah in the next session.
Sure.
I wanted to just in this explanation of Tahtawi ibn Ashir, when he talks about puberty, he talks about it and he says, هو قوة تحدث في الصبي يخرج بها عن حالة الطفولة إلى حالة الرجولية. Oh, I'm sorry, عن حالة الطفولية إلى حالة الرجولية. So here, he says that it is this physical capacity that develops in the young child that takes that young child from the state of childhood into the state of adulthood, and in this case he's mentioning manhood, right? Or we can say also womanhood, right? And that capacity, of course, and this is me adding on to that capacity is a biological capacity, is a developmental capacity, right? وقد جعل الشارع لها علامات. So here in the Sharia, sometimes the term الشارع is used and it refers to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, that Allah established indications يستدل بها على حصولها. From these indications, a person is capable of identifying that puberty has taken place, right? That it's puberty, that the person has reached a state of puberty. وهذه العلامات خمس. And so
Yes.
there are 5 indications, right? That which, when they are present, we can determine if a person is in a state of puberty or not. The term maturity, I don't like that definition for a number of different reasons, because a person can be mature and not pubescent. It's not a
Yes.
it's not a
Exactly.
it's not a good translation, although it has its proper place. But here we're talking about bulug, right? So it's Islam, bulug, aql, you know, el- we'll get into the rest of them. So far,
Pubic hairs. Emission of sexual
so here,
discharge.
so here, so here, 5 uh conditions, five indications are mentioned. 3 of them are held in common between the male and the female. The first
Right.
is the wet dream, and then he specifies more. The wet dream and the emission of sexual fluid, right?
Yes.
The other one is the pubic hairs, right?
Right.
And then he mentions on the third, he says that there's differences of opinion with regard to it, and that is the age.
Okay.
قد اختلف فيه.
Mashallah.
Right, right. The age is different over what age
Right.
is the age to be considered the uh the age of puberty, or the age where puberty is determined. So
Uh-huh.
biological factors are much more certain than the age. Although in our time period, which is, I don't want to complicate the discussion, but I mean, this is for the sake of knowledge. The food and the chemicals in the food, more specifically, they have changed the biological indications, making a child mature biologically faster than what was the norm in the past due
Right.
to hormones being put into the food. We can't escape that discussion, right? And so that's why we should be careful, right? Because a child, what happens when a child is reaches bulug, the age, or reaches bulug as a state? What happens? What are some of the things that that child can do?
You're asking us a question or is it a
Yeah, I'm
rhetorical
asking
one?
as a question.
What happens when a child? Well,
What can
he
that
can do
child
things.
do when they reach puberty?
He can have he can have sexual relations.
Right. And so
Encounters.
if a child has biologically advanced due to chemicals, not due to a natural process,
Yes.
right?
I don't know if that the chemicals work mentally as far as
That's the point.
physically.
That's the point of
Excuse me?
saying, I mean, there's studies on this stuff. It's not, I'm not making this up.
No, I'm not. I don't think you are.
So the point being is like brothers that rush and try to marry these young girls,
Right.
or even these young boys get married, they're not mature. Many of them are not mature emotionally, psychologically,
And intellectually.
yeah, intellectually, experience wise. So
Yes.
we have to consider that.
Mashallah.
You know what I'm saying? There's cases where people don't respect that and it's a mess. And then
Right.
so 18 is the mashhur position in the madhab.
Mashallah. I
So
didn't know that.
in the Maliki, in the Hanaf, in the Shafi school, like I mentioned, is 15. And then
Yes, also in the Hanbali. Yeah.
two signs or indications are signs that pertain to the women, and that's the menstrual cycle and pregnancy,
Yes.
right? Those are clear signs that the person has reached what? Bulug or puberty. So that we can pause there with that regard. So أما شروط وجوبها فخمسة أشياء. But so in the case of the conditions of the obligation, there's five things. الأول الإسلام والثاني البلوغ. This doesn't have the dot here, but البلوغ والعقل. And here goes the term in Arabic that is used in this text. In other texts,
Yes.
it had been said in a different way, but I wanted to come back to this. ارتفاع الحيض والنفاس. And that
Right.
basically is that the state of haid or nifas, which is the postpartum bleeding, is lifted, that that person is no longer in that state. Then the salah is made an obligation, right? And the last, dukhul al-waqti. So we covered all of these with some
Right.
detail. We covered these with some detail, and we covered some of these with general indications or passing conversations. But these
Yes.
covered with detail, even to the point of focusing on this part here with regard to the youth and the obligation of them to pray. We covered the hadith on it. So we got this down pretty good. Uh, the rest with regard to the conditions of the salah, we'll cover conditions to the soundness of the salah. We'll cover that in the next class. Inshallah, we mentioned that the enumeration or the numbering of them is a matter of ijtihad. Al-Abbi points to that. Al-Abbi al-Maliki points to that. That's a way to reconcile between the different texts, and sometimes that we find
MashaAllah.
they clash with each other because they do. That could be frustrating to the student of knowledge, and that could be a point for not wanting to study the madhab, right? But that is uh, indicated to already that why it is that we find those differences. I've mentioned that over and over again, so it's really clear in people's minds. But I think with this, we have a final session in which we solidified, what was said and kind of brought it all together because we had
It seems
discussions.
it seems clearer in the Arabic than in English.
It does. It is. That's the reason why I paused because the English terminology sometimes when it's created, it creates confusion. Uh, because you're digging for definitions and so on and so forth, right? And so that has its own issues that come up with it. That's why I try to refer back to the Arabic, right? In the long run.
Mm.
أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لي ولكم والحمد لله رب العالمين استغفر الله